today I am working on yet another nose for the Cedar Strip WAW velomobile. It's freezing cold outside, so the noise you hear in the background is my new propane heater that's necessary when you live in some place as cold as Minnesota. So you might be wondering, why in the world am I building yet another nose when the one I have more or less works fine? The first thing is that it's a removable nose, WAW style, and it's never sat very flush here with the edge, and that does disrupt the aerodynamics to some extent. And also the nose itself weighs 6 pounds, but the biggest reason is this very, very hefty aluminum boom subframe. The boom subframe itself weighs another something like 8 or 9 pounds before you add in the triple crank set and the pedals. Those are not actually the pedals I normally use. That's quite a lot of weight, and by the time you add in the cranks and the pedals, it's probably 11 or 12 pounds, plus the nose. That gives you around 18 pounds just hanging off the front of the velomobile, and when you've got a 90-pound machine, that's a good percentage of the weight. So what I'm doing is I'm going to build a new nose that's going to be permanently affixed to the front, and I'll be doing a DF Quest Alpha 7 Milan type of boom subframe that will be attached to the SBAI air intake in the nose. And the nose is going to be made out of carbon fiber. All of this lip is going to be removed. That'll take a little bit of weight off, and that will allow me to lighten up the front end. I'm hoping to get maybe 5 pounds less up front, and I may consider changing to a double crank set in the front to reduce the weight. Taking this off will take at least a few grams off, and hopefully lighten things up just a little bit. So what I'm doing is I have made a foam form cutout based off of the original nose, and then I am cutting out a piece that has the profile for the nose, and then I'm going to also do a piece that'll go up here and give the side profile of the nose. Yeah, I did that when I built the original nose, and that was a good way to add pieces in, and then I could work on sanding it down until it was the shape that I wanted. And then I've got a gallon of auto body filler. First you need to paint the foam, because the auto body filler will actually eat your foam. And then I'll fill it in, smooth it out, and then I may put a layer of paint or something on it, a layer of primer. Apologies again for the flame-throwing space heater in the background, but here's the final profile for the nose. You can see that there's just a little bit of a change here along the side, and that it doesn't taper quite as much up at the top. That little bit here is where I generally rub, and this should take care of most of that rubbing issue, and then leave plenty of room at the top for the SBAI intake and also for the headlight. The cross pieces now are on the nose, and you can see how I've made this cross section, and then tomorrow I will fill in that cross section with other pieces of foam and then I will sand the whole thing down to a nice smooth taper. But having these pieces gives me a nice kind of a template to work off of. And then the whole thing again will get covered with auto body filler after I've put a barrier layer of paint on it. This nose is going to be just a little narrower here in the very front compared to the previous nose. It's got a little bit more of a quick taper. The other one was a little bit more blunt like the Milan. And this one will be closer to what you see with the DF. And there'll be some things here along the side that'll get sanded down just a little bit more. And then the other side I'll have to fill in a little bit of filler because the sides aren't perfectly symmetrical, even though I tried to line up the centerpiece pretty much right down the middle. Welcome to day 3 of making a new carbon fiber nose. And again, I'm working on the plug. And yesterday I cut these pieces out to the rough shape, and now today I'm working on getting the final shape, working off some photos and also off the former nose. The biggest difference between the two noses is, one, this one's going to be much lighter, and two, this here is a straight line, and you can see on the bottom there where it has been rubbing. And this one, the upturn starts immediately. It's not easy to see in the photo, but the upturn starts immediately instead of staying straight for a while. And that little bit should be enough to fix the clearance issue I have in the garage. So what I'm doing now, these top pieces are all loose, and I'm working kind of piece by piece, working out and getting this part down to the rough shape. And then I'll take the pieces for the other side and I'll set them up against each other, and that should make it a little bit easier to copy the curves from one side to the next, because of course the goal is to get things as symmetrical as possible. All right, I think I have a rough shape now that I'm happy with. I think that's about as small as I can get the front to go with this design. So now I'm going to be working today and tomorrow evening on transferring that shape over to the other side, and then I'll get the bottom shaped up. So in order to match the sides, what I'm doing is I'm taking the pieces that I shaped on this side and I set it up here against the other piece, and then I trace the edges there and also the edge on this side, and then I'm using that flush cut saw that I had sitting around to cut the pieces down to the shape and size. I've just finished doing the rough shape of the new nose. My plans for making it symmetrical worked relatively well. I've got a little work yet to do on the bottom part. I glued those pieces in before having them off to compare them. I've got some work to do now with the sander, specifically on the sides that are relatively vertical and not really following as well as I'd like the... Hello, Johan. It's not following the profile of the sides quite as much as I would like at this point, but again, this is just a rough shaping of things. And now that things are glued on, I can work on shaping the sides just a little bit more with the sander, It'll make a great big mess out in the garage. Get a look here at the side profile. Now you can get a little bit better idea of the final shape of the nose. And once the auto body filler is on there, then I can do another sanding and get it down to a pretty precise shape. And at that point then it needs to be test fitted on the Velomobile to make sure that it fits perfectly along these bottom edges here, so that it can be attached to the Velomobile without any problems with loss of good aerodynamics. So once that paint is completely dry, it's pretty close, but once it's completely dry, then I can do the auto body filler, and then I can do some final sanding. I think I've reached a final shape now for the nose. You can get a nice comparison here between that and the previous one. You can see this one has a little bit more aggressive taper to it. It's a little bit less blunt than the previous nose. It's got a little bit more aggressive curve here down in the center, since the indent goes just a little bit further than the previous one. Top shape is very similar, but again you can see here that this one is quite a bit less blunt. I've now started test fitting the nose so I can see what adjustments need to be made. I've got a little bit of sanding to do, but you can see there's quite a bit of upturn underneath, and that's for a reason. I have the back end sits up a little higher than it should, and it tilts the front down. So in order to clear things, I need a fair amount of upturn, which this nose has. Once that back end sits up, I think it won't look quite so drastic as it is here. But I've got a little bit of a issue here. I've got this part that's going to need to be sanded down. The top is a little bit tall. This side fits a little bit better, but again here will need to be sanded down. And you know, some of that is, in fact up here probably needs a little bit added. Some of that is simply because the shape of the front has changed a little bit now that I've pulled off, you know, cut out the wheel wells and everything else. So there's a little bit of probably a little bit of a slouch to things. I have the base supported so that it's as flat as possible. So yeah, I've got some sanding to do, and I also need to true things up this part up in here. The wood is sticking out just a little bit too much, so I'm gonna shave that down a little bit so I can get a better fit. And then I'll have to redo some things. The auto body filler has come detached in several places, so I'll have to remove that, sand down the foam a little bit more, and get a little bit truer shape. And then down here, the profile here is a little bit different. So I'm gonna need to fill that in too. Underneath looks to be fine, as best I can tell. But anytime you add a nose on this way, you can expect that you're gonna have some work like this to do. I also am gonna take some foam and cut to the shape and fit it in, and then I'll hot glue it on to the back of the plug so that things don't chip